What's up guys, Nito here, and I wanted to do a quick video showcasing some of the new mechanics of the Deadeye ascendancy that I've been kind of experimenting with. So first off is Ricochet, which allows you to chain off of walls 30% of the time. And then the other thing is Focal Point, which has 75% increased effect of your marks. When you combine that with Sniper's Mark, which splits towards 4 additional targets, you end up splitting towards 7 additional targets, as well as dealing enemies taking 70% increased damage from projectile hits. So already Sniper's Mark is a really powerful debuff, right? 70% increased damage taken is basically sort of like 70% more damage. But I wanted to see if you could abuse the splitting as well as the wall chaining to essentially split your projectile and then have those split projectiles chain off the wall back to the original target. So what I found, and what I'll demonstrate here, is that it unfortunately does not work like that. So this is a Spectral Shield Throw character, and I am intentionally using a really terrible shield and running a low-level map just so I can demonstrate some of these mechanics. So this is a nice stationary boss. So you can see that he's cursed with the Sniper's Mark, and it's causing the main projectile to split a bunch of times, and you can see that it's bouncing back. Some of the time it bounces back, right? Which is cool, right? So I thought it was going to be doing, 10 times the damage because you have all these extra projectiles bouncing back to the main target. But if you actually look at the health bar, none of those bounces are actually dealing damage. So unfortunately, it doesn't actually work, right? So it seems like they can chain off the wall back to the main target, but they never actually deal damage except for on the initial hit. So that kind of sucks, right? However, you can do some other really interesting things with hydrosphere. So hydrosphere essentially lets you summon this little ball of water, and you can hit it. So like I can actually summon this near the boss, and then chain off of it and hit the boss, right? Why is that important? So with Spectral Shield Throw specifically, when you throw a projectile and it collides with something, you'll see these other little shards shoot off, right? And the shards deal 25% less damage. So what happens with hydrosphere is if you're targeting the hydrosphere and you're chaining to the boss, you're going to also fire off shards as soon as you hit the hydrosphere, and those shards can also hit the boss. So you're essentially dealing 175% of your damage by hitting with two projectiles, basically. And I also tested, whether or not the shards from the split with the Sniper's Mark could chain back to the boss. Again, it seems like they can't actually deal damage when they return and hit the boss. So that's really unfortunate that it doesn't work like that, but obviously it would be incredibly broken. I calculated it would be something like 800% more damage if you could actually chain all of the individual shards back from the Sniper's Mark split projectiles, and they could all hit the same target. So obviously that would be super broken. But you still do get a really nice buff from using hydrosphere. And the other really cool thing is I'm using this Fledgling helmet, which provides far shot, but it makes it so that enemies at close range projectiles cannot hit enemies. So the range is actually not that bad. So you can see where the edge of my Flesh and Stone circle is here, and that's about the range that you can't hit an enemy. So if they're within that circle, basically in melee range, your projectile is just going to pass right through them. It's not going to deal damage. The only time that's ever really a problem is when there's a proximity shield and the enemy is in melee range, and you need to be able to hit them at close range, right? So what you can do is you can actually drop your hydrosphere far away, you can target the hydrosphere, and it'll chain off the hydrosphere back to the proximity shield enemy who's in melee range of you, and then they can get damaged because you're within the proximity shield, but you're hitting enemies, outside. You can also try to chain off a wall if there's a wall nearby, or of course another enemy if there's more enemies nearby. So it's kind of annoying, but it's not. It's when you consider that the Fledgling Far Shot gives 60% more damage, as well as a bunch of projectile speed and projectile damage. Like, it's kind of worth it, honestly. And I get to save the point from picking up Far Shot on my ascendancy, or I could use this on some other ascendancy, right? Like, I don't have to be a Deadeye. So yeah, I mean, this helm looks actually pretty good. Some of the other interesting things I'll just point out about this build: the new Sinistral gloves give reduced attack damage with the main hand and increased attack damage with the offhand. That works with Spectral Shield Throw and Shield Charge because they are both considered to be attacking with the shield, which is in your offhand. So you kind of ignore the downside of using these gloves, which makes them just extremely good for Spectral Shield Throw in general. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm using a wand with a decent amount of spell damage on it, and I'm anointing Wand Slinger. So you can see up here, Wand Slinger makes increases and reductions to spell damage also apply to attacks while wielding a wand. And that while wielding is important wording, because what that means is that you don't actually have to attack with the wand itself. So we're attacking with our shield, but we're wielding a wand, which means that increases and reductions to spell damage are also applying to our attack damage. So we can basically scale Spectral Shield Throw with spell damage, which is really cool. And it doesn't require the use of like Crown of Eyes or anything, right? So that lets us use this helmet instead. So that's kind of a neat interaction as well. The other thing I'll mention is that these increased chain range nodes are actually really nice to have on a Deadeye using wall chains, because they actually increase the distance away from the wall you can be in order to have those projectiles chain off the wall. So obviously, this would be a lot nicer if it did allow you to damage a single target by chaining back to it. Unfortunately, that doesn't work, but it's still quite nice for clearing. And those wall chains can really, you can be quite far from the wall and still chain if you pick up these extra chain range nodes. So those are definitely worth taking, or at least considering on a wall chain Deadeye. And then yeah, I think that's about it. I'm using a assembler wand, which has the generate charges implicit, which is kind of cool. This is a heist base, and then I just slapped a essence on it for spell damage, and happened to hit a couple extra resistances, which is nice because none of the other mods on a wand are going to really be relevant. And then I just crafted trigger. So I'm triggering Sniper's Mark, and I'm also normally triggering Hydrosphere, and it actually makes for a very smooth playstyle. I'll just do the rest of this map. This is just a shitty low tier map, and obviously I'm using a shitty shield, but it's a pretty smooth playstyle. You're especially when you're kind of like stationary for these rituals and stuff like that. It's nice to be able to just kind of aim at one point. So like one of the issues with Spectral Shield Throw is like you can miss, right? You can just like miss the enemy completely. And then it does nothing. But if you're aiming at a stationary target like your Hydrosphere, you're never going to miss, right? Because it's just going to auto target off of the sphere, and it just makes for a smoother playstyle. And the extra split projectiles from the auto casting of Sniper's Mark makes clearing just much smoother for a skill. For a skill like Spectral Shield Throw that completely relies on chains and doesn't have any AoE, yeah, you really need those extra split projectiles if you want to clear dense packs. So, anyways, that's kind of what it looks like. I'll show you actually, so you can see if these enemies are in melee range, I'm not going to be able to hit them at all. But if I target my Hydrosphere, it'll chain back to them even if they're in melee range, and it'll hit them when they're in melee range, because the projectile has basically always traveled a far distance and then come back. So you always get the far shot, the more damage from far shot, and you basically never have the less damage downside. So it makes it pretty consistent to use hydrosphere in conjunction with chaining and far shot. So it's kind of a nice interaction. So anyways, I just wanted to share some of those findings. Maybe you already knew this. Maybe you've already messed around with Deadeye. I think the ascendancy changes in general are really cool. But yeah, it would be even cooler if you could chain back to single targets. But unfortunately, they don't seem to deal damage. Anyways, thanks for watching.